grow strong in faith, and the only possible way he can do that is to teach us to resist these storms that appear out of nowhere in our lives. 266 Now I'm not saying for a second that we go out and look for such a storm, I'm saying that these storms will arise in our lives when we least expect them, nor want them, because John 3 verse 8 tells us that the wind blows wherever it wants. You hear its sound, but you do not know where it comes from, and where it goes. So it is with everyone who is born of the Spirit, and we are his believers. That verse is telling us that it is not our fault that these storms arise, and we should not take the disasters we have had to endure in our lives as our fault, as many would blame. In fact, these same disciples this morning were following Jesus' orders. Jesus ordered them onto the ship against their own good judgment and common sense, and they carried out his wishes. They had not molested him, but had probably pleased him, and therefore this dreadful storm was not a storm of judgment upon them, as they were at the center of his will. And so we can clearly see that God will not protect us from all turmoil and distress in our lives. He will protect us. Hebrews 13 verse 5 tells us very clearly that he will never leave us, nor will he leave us. So we confidently say, "The Lord is my helper, I will not be afraid." But the Lord will use these storms in our lives to teach us to be calm and confident through the faith he is developing in us. Now I don't like this any more than you do, but you can see how we need to see these storms as something to embrace and overcome, instead of seeing them as something designed to defeat us. What I'm trying to say is that through these storms we are being developed into the likeness of God, or developed according to how God wants us to be. We are being designed by God to bring us to victory, his victory, but more for the next world instead of this. Now that's pretty strong, because it puts our lives directly in context with his, that God is developing us for when we meet him, although his faith certainly comes in handy in this life. 6 And I can prove this, and I can prove this. Think for a moment about all the problems you have had in your life, then think about the problems of your friends and colleagues. Even their enemies have had it. Have their problems been as extreme or as strange as yours? Have they been even remotely similar to what you've experienced? If you're like me, you'll see that none of them have ever come close to what we've been up against or had to overcome, but we know deep down that we are richer and wiser because of them. And we can accept it, but that's why that bothers us, and I think the why is because we are growing in these storms, and that the Lord is taking us to an even higher spiritual level of participation in it. A level where he is doing everything he can to drain our self-confidence and teaching us to trust him. 267. 6 storms in my life changed me intensely. Sometimes a storm will follow a great spiritual event such as these disciples had witnessed. Many years ago, I was having great difficulties, and that's when I turned to Christ, and then I knew that everything in the Bible was true, that Jesus was alive and that he was my Lord, and with